my father worked nights, my mom worked, during the day. So when my dad got home from work, early in the morning, it was a handball over to him, taking care of me. So I got an opportunity to really bond with my dad, like really early on, which was really cool.
Welcome to Voices of Gender Equity, the podcast where we deep dive into real and raw stories of impact. I'm your host, Ashley McGrath, and each episode I'm aiming to inspire and influence you, our listeners, into action by bringing you authentic conversations, success stories, and practical advice. Join us as we amplify the voices of individuals from all walks of life. Activists, scholars, CEOs, and everyday champions, sharing their journeys, insights, and strategies for driving meaningful change. So, whether you're a seasoned advocate or just beginning to explore this crucial topic, Voices of Gender Equity is your space to listen, learn, and engage. Welcome to the conversation. Welcome to Voices of Gender Equity. Joining us on today's episode, we have CEOs for Gender Equity's very own Henry Cooper. Henry is our Strategic Partnerships and Engagement Manager, which involves working with our members to drive gender equity impact and seek out new CEOs for gender equity in our community. So, Henry, we know your name. We obviously know where you work. And I have had the pleasure of working with you for probably almost a year now.
Yeah, almost.
But for the benefit of our lovely listeners, can you please share a little bit more about who is Henry Cooper?
No. Okay.
Henry Cooper Jr.
Yes. Henry Cooper, and I am the Strategic Partnerships and Engagement Manager with CGE. I'm originally from New York City. Born and raised, and I am an avid mentor educator. I used to work in the music industry for about 7 years back in New York. I was a sound engineer for about 7 years. And I would say that I'm a bit of a creative. And I always tried to steer away from education when I was going through my career journey because my family were all educators. So the men in my family, they all worked for the city. They were train drivers or bus drivers, or they were police officers. So they always worked for the city, and the women were all educators. So they were principals, assistant principals, teachers, or worked in private schools and public schools. And I always tried to steer away from that. I was always considered a black sheep in my family because I was always going the other way. Then I just always found myself mentoring, and I always found myself, talking with students and building programs and scholarship programs for kids that were in my neighborhood, and making sure that they had kind of the opportunities that I had growing up, So then I migrated over here, went into education again, because, you go to what you know. And then, I found CGE for the most part. Being a part of this has been, just a passion of mine. And it's been a big part of who I am and what I'm about. So thank you, really.
Well, thank you for being you and all the amazing work that you're already doing for us.
Yeah.
So thank you for that introduction, and I'm sure we'll get to dabble a bit more into
so much.
your upbringing and everything because it's fascinating.
Yeah.
But I'd love to just kick off, as we do, by asking, was there a defining moment for you which really ignited your passion for gender equity?
Oh, I was always thinking about this, and there were so many different points in my life where this has come about. That was always on the forefront for me. I think one of them would have to be, there's a story that I tell that there's a young girl that was in an after-school program that I was doing. And she always said that she wanted to be a firefighter. It was just her passion, like ever since she was little, like she always wanted to do it, and she was going into high school at this point. And a lot of people were always telling her, they're like, "Oh, you can't do that." But the only reason why they kept saying that she couldn't do that was because she was female. And I was like, well, helping people in fighting fires is not a gender specific, task. So that point, I just kept encouraging her, and now she's a firefighter in New York. But it was just believing in her and showing her that she could do it. Yeah, that's just something early on that just ignited for me, where it was like, nah, I keep hearing this over and over again. I'm like, no. And then me being a basketball coach, me and my brother-in-law, we were coaches for always girls basketball teams. We had boys basketball teams as well, but we were always giving those opportunities to the girls because we were like, a lot of people aren't coaching them or training them. So I'm like, hey, let's do this. Like, they need an opportunity as well. They deserve to play. So, yeah.
Love it. So just say from the early days, you're kind of
Yeah.
you noticed that there were barriers.
Yeah.
And obviously, like, we talk a lot about, you've mentioned some key barriers for women, automatically think, oh, firefighter, no, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Like, of course that's not true,
Yeah.
and then, the lack of coaches for girls in basketball. But I know that you've also got a passion for the gendered kind of norms and challenges, which mainly, affect men. So
Yeah.
can you tell our listeners a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's just growing up. My parents were. It was a collaboration within our house, really. When I hear that men are supposed to go out and work and women are supposed to stay home, like, it always confused me a little bit, because that's not how our family was. Like, even our extended family, it wasn't that way. My father worked nights. My mom worked, during the day. So when my dad got home from work, early in the morning, it was a handball over to him, taking care of me. So I got an opportunity to really bond with my dad, like, really early on, which was really cool. Like, him introducing me to the music that he listened to, me being around my uncles. It was really, really important, and it really shaped who I was and who I am, really, really early on. And then, even household chores and duties. I mean, my dad was the first person to teach me how to cook, so he was teaching me how to cook breakfast in the morning. And once I learned that, my mom would show me how to cook dinner when she got home. And I was always in the kitchen with her. I was always in the kitchen with him. So it was all of these things. It was just shared responsibilities, really. And it shows community. It's not about one person doing something and the other doing that. It's actually coming together and actually working together to raise, children. So, yeah, that's
So cool.
Yeah.
And, this was a long time ago, but, did your dad, receive any, I don't know, any kind of, because I hear that, getting more men's engagement in parenting and care responsibilities is obviously something which we are really advocating for at CGE. But I hear that, and I believe it's changing, but especially men who were quite kind of early adopters in that and really actively engaging, like your father, that they had some kind of almost like discrimination from the mothers, like being the primary caregivers.
Yeah.
So was that a thing for your dad, or because your broader family was across it as well? Not so much.
Yeah, I always said me and my dad are very, very similar in the aspect of we don't really care what anybody else has to say. It was really his brothers, they were just raised in that way, and having that kind of support system around you when you have other people that are doing exactly what you're doing and how you see things really shapes kind of who you are. So yeah, there wasn't really any backlash, like even from other people in our community that were saying, "Oh, why are you, staying home with the kids?" And my dad was always a very big advocate of making sure that you're present for your family. My dad, I asked him. I remember this this is something that really shaped me, and not a lot of people know this. So my dad, and when I got older, when I was about in high school, I asked my dad, I asked him, you were pretty senior in your position. I'm like, did you ever want to go like a little higher in your profession, like getting promotions and stuff? And he was like, yeah, I always thought about it, but who's going to be at your basketball game? Like, who's going to your t-ball and baseball games? He was like, if I would have did those things, I wouldn't have been able to be present for, everything that you were doing. So that really shaped me in my perspective on like, wow, okay, like the sacrifice that you made for the betterment of your family, like that's massive.
Wow.
To me. Yeah.
And that was a really conscious thing for him,
And he made sure that my mom was able to achieve everything that she wanted to. Like, she went back to university, and my dad supported that. So he was doing extra to make sure that she could accomplish what she needed to accomplish. So that really showed me. It's like, there's always going to be a level of sacrifices. What are you willing to do for your family?
Wow, that's huge.
Yeah.
And obviously, that's one of the things which we're trying to kind of, I feel like from, him being a parent and raising you at that stage compared to where we are now, like, I feel like we're nowhere near the level I'd love to see us at.
Yeah.
But in terms of, like, it's not actually, like, it's noble that your dad consciously sacrificed that, but I don't accept that should be the way it is, like, right? And I feel like we have come leaps and bounds in this space, but there are still people out there are still barriers, conscious and unconscious barriers, which, people feel that, like, they can't have both, or the organizations are set up to kind of, enable that, that belief and that fact. But obviously, in the work that we're doing in our members, like, we see that them just flipping that on their head, and people getting promoted while they're on parental leave and all that. So it's kind of like an exciting shift, but like, it makes me like a little bit sad, that was the case where it is, that was the case back then. But at the same time, it gives me so much hope as to how far we've come.
Yeah, I always see it as progression, right? It's like the progression of technology. It's kind of this. It's pretty much the same, where you have to be more efficient. So socially and within your family, it's how can we do things a little better? Like, what was before doesn't necessarily need to be what's now. Like, it could be kind of like a little bit of a foundation, but it has to be some progression, and you have to keep growing and keep getting better at what you're doing. So that means even within your families, it's okay, how can we progress this? Like, you see how you grew up, and there were certain aspects that, hey, maybe we could have did things a little bit better. Why don't you do that for the next time? Then, so for your family now, let's try to progress this, and then your kids will progress that for their family.
100%.
So
it's exciting to think like what that next phase would be, wouldn't it?
It's really, really cool to see.
Mad.
Yeah.
So big question next. How do you define gender equity, and why do you think it is important in today's society?
When it comes to equity, I always like telling like this kind of analogy to help people to understand like really what it is. Because I feel like a lot of people conflate the equality with equity, right? So I always say, I'm like, okay, you have two people, let's just say Jimmy and Sarah, and they both want to swing on the swing, but there's a little bit of a problem. Like, Sarah's a little bit too short in order to reach the swing. So equality is giving them both stools in order to reach that. Equity comes in that maybe Sarah needs a little bigger, taller stool in order to reach that. It's really about giving people what they need to make sure that their starting point is equal. It's being aware that not everybody's starting point is the same. So it's making sure that people have that opportunity. I think it's really important in today's society because there's a lot of there's a lot of groups and there's a lot of people that don't have that kind of start, that don't really have that opportunity to start, whether it's generational or, maybe it's culturally, So it's the understanding of that. And once you have that understanding, that's where the empathy comes from.
I love that.
So, yeah.
And that's you've totally embodied what it's all about. It's considering the different starting points of people, and it's kind of like once that clicks in your mind, like you can't like unsee it or unthink it, which I think is
you
great.
See it everywhere.
So like then when that clicks, you just naturally start applying that lens to like to what you do, and things like that. Like it's even I think of the return to work program for parents that we did. Like we were thinking, well, even like how to like appeal to those people. Well, where are they? They're in libraries, supermarkets, so we're having that. Okay, like that's where they're hanging out. So to get these people to this event, we need to think differently. Like it's not just a newsletter to our current subscriber. We need to think differently. And how do we make sure that all working parents have access to this event? So it's like thinking differently.
I think even when we were, planning everything and when we were putting everything together, I'm like, we had diversity in the room. And that's why it's really, really important for organizations to have diversity in the room, because you'll have different lenses to, solving an issue or solving a problem. I always say, I'm like, if you have people that look like you and talk like you in the room, you're always going to have the same kind of outcome. I'm like, so it's always great to have other perspectives and other people within the room to help you to achieve things. I was like, because there's always going to be gaps. You want other people to help you with filling those kinds of gaps.
100%. And like that return to work project was like a prime example. Like how much did we learn from the diverse experiences in that planning team? Far out.
And there was so many different like areas and so many different strategies that we had where it was like, oh, this is really, really cool. Yes, it would be a little bit more legwork for you, but the outcome of it, people getting the opportunity to actually better their family and better their lives, it trumps all the work that you have to do.
Always.
Yeah.
So I'd now like to move on to the topic of you mentioned that you're really passionate and actively involved in mentoring yourself. But for you, are there role models or mentors who have played a significant role in shaping your understanding, particularly from a gender equity perspective?
Yeah. There are a couple of people that were very, very significant in my life. And sometimes I always have to take a minute to really talk about them, because it's like I get choked up a little bit because a couple of them are no longer with us. But my grandmother is one that really shaped, who I am and the path that I'm on, her being the matriarch of her family. Like when she spoke, everybody listened. She didn't talk much, but when she did, everybody just shut up, So she had that kind of power, and really gave the power to my fathers and my uncles, because they have a huge family. It was like about 9 of them. So it was 7 boys, 2 girls. My grandmother, great. She was somebody that went back to school later on in her life for nursing, and really shaped who I am, and she was amazing. Next is would have to be just my mom and my dad, how they were, and showing me that gender is not present when you're taking care of the family. There's no for me. There's no such thing as roles, really. There's just responsibilities that you have. It's a team effort, and that's what shaped me. And then there's 2 other people, and one is my first basketball coach. His name is Ray Pagan, and he was the person that gave me my first job when I was 12 years old, working for a summer camp. And how he was with community and what he did for the kids that were in my neighborhood and around, whether you're male or female. Like, he always made sure that he put you in the best position possible for you to succeed. When it came to sports, he said, and this is how I am, he goes, rather coach the girls than the boys because they got a chip on their shoulder. They're willing to fight. Like, boys, yeah, they got something there, but, it's expected. He was like, for girls, they want to show that they belong and there's a chip there. And he was like, you get the most out. So that's how I was, and that's what shaped me. My teacher, one of my teachers when I was in high school, he was how I am, and my personality really comes from him as well, because he really helped us, and he showed us really the meaning of empathy, the meaning of understanding, and taking care of community. Because we told him, we were like, why are you here? Like, you could be anywhere else in the world or anywhere else, like at another school. Why are you at this school? And he said, I just wanted to make sure that you guys were all right. He goes, I wanted to make sure that you guys were able to succeed because being black in a predominantly white school, he was also black as well. And there weren't many of us in the school, so he was there, and he wanted to make sure that we were all right because he went to that school as well. So he stayed there for all of my 4 years, and then once we left, he left. Wow. So it was really, yeah.
So powerful.
Yeah.
So I'd love to get your take now on, in your, obviously you've been, naturally just, inspired by this topic of gender equity from a young age. So I'd like to know, in your experience, how has the landscape of gender equity changed, and what positive things have you observed?
I think one of the things that has changed is there's more conversation now. And there's deeper conversations, not just the what, but everybody's really, really interested in the how, and they want to educate themselves. So now it's a conscious effort for people. That's the change that I see, where it's no longer a don't talk about it, let's sweep it under the rug kind of issue. Now it's present. And people are having more conversations around it. I think the future of it and what's to come, I see it transforming organizations, and I see it not even with organizations, but I also see it with our state as well, where I think we have a really good opportunity now to really be leaders in this space, just as a state. Where this is something that we can really hang our hat on and show everybody what community can do and what happens when you actually come together with one voice, one accord, and what you believe in and what you can achieve when you actually come together. So the future of that, that's what I see, and that's the changes that I see.
It's really exciting, isn't it?
Yeah. That's why I love doing what I do.
And I couldn't agree more. Like, it's not, it's beyond, you need to do this. Like, it's actually critical to your business.
Yeah.
It's critical for our communities.
It just makes your organization better. Like, you get more productivity out of the people that are in your organization. It's like, it shouldn't be rocket science, really, and I feel like when you take care of your people, like, they'll run through the wall for you, and then they'll be loyal to you when you actually start treating people like people, and showing them that you care. And it's not just telling them that you care, it's actually the action behind it that shows them that. That's where the trust comes from, and that's where the retention comes from, because people don't leave organizations that they love. They might have other, reasons of why they do, but they'll never want to leave strictly because, oh, this place is good, so I'm going to leave. No, they won't do that. So if you take care of people, you'll be all right.
Well, I hope you don't leave CEOs for gender
Oh no, I'm not going.
equity.
I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. Like, I absolutely, this is the best job that I've ever had. So,
that's
to be
great.
honest.
Great to hear. Awesome. But look, as we know, it's not always plain sailing
No.
in the advocacy world. And so specifically from a gender equity perspective, can you share, have you faced adversity in your efforts? Like personally, before you moved to Australia or afterwards, and, before or after CGE, have you faced adversity? And if so, how did you overcome it?
Oh, there's been a ton of adversity. I think there's like a couple of things. Like it's conversations, really. When you hear certain kinds of conversations, where you hear people talk about someone in a manner where they're saying, "Oh, this woman is just really rigid and hard, and she doesn't say much and stuff like that." And then you realize it's like, well, this person has been doing this for like 20 years in a male-dominated industry. I'm like, what do you think? How do you think she's going to pay? It's like, do you blame her for it? I'm like, if it was the other way around, then it would be, okay, she's a great leader. She's amazing. He is like really, really strong and just a great leader. Like, you can't have. It's not really. That's not fair.
It's double standards kind of thing.
And then the other kind of adversity that I've had is, personally, I tell people sometimes, I'm like, it's not really something that's really spoken about, but I remember being in a job and at a Christmas party, and then a woman like rubbing against me when I didn't want that to happen. I didn't ask for that, and then my superior standing next to me just laugh, that were also female, so that kind of, scenario, I'm like, if this was flipped, I would be out of a job.
That's right, double standards.
But it's just, people just laughing it off, like, it's nothing. So having that conversation with people after that, I faced that, but some people don't have that confidence to really speak up, not even in that moment, but afterwards, like to really speak up and address it. So I'm like, that's how I handled that, where it was a conversation where it's like, can we all come into this room and actually have a conversation?
How did that go?
People were trying to brush it off or make it seem like, oh, well, you were okay with that. Like, what gave you that impression? Just because I was smiling and I was the only person there and I didn't have anybody else around me, where it was just the four of you there. I'm like, what do you think that I should have done in order to change that scenario, or to help myself? I'm like, especially when I have my superiors there. I'm like, if I really wanted to say what I wanted to say, probably would have been fired. But
that's right.
This is a conversation that we needed to have behind closed doors. I'm like, not in public in front of everybody, So that's kind of the way that I handled that one.
Wow. And you were put in the spot. Obviously, you weren't expecting that. Who knows the right thing to say or do in those scenarios?
Yeah.
But yeah, massive double standards.
Yeah. So I'm like, I'm like, consent goes both ways. And it's just making sure that you create an environment where people feel safe. And it sucks that it happens more predominantly with women. I'm like, but it does happen with men as well. And when those kinds of things happen, it's like you have to make sure that we're speaking up, like men are speaking up about these things and supporting the women that are around them, So.
Wow. Learning so much about you, Henry. Loving it.
There's so much.
So much to unpack. So we've had lots of conversations at Team CGE about we just feel like we've just got the best jobs ever, and we just actually just can't believe that we get paid to do what we do.
It's crazy.
It's mad, right? But so I'd love to just dig into that a little bit more and ask you, what's the most rewarding aspect of your work, which in our case is all about advancing gender equity?
Oh, there's so many different things. Like the connection that you can make with organizations and the people within the organizations is really cool. I think the relationships that you build with the senior leaderships, with the CEOs, and members of government, like I think that's really really valuable. But I think the best thing is when I'm out and about, like outside of work, like whether I'm at a bar or a restaurant or something, and meet people and talk with them, and then to hear their journey within the organizations that you work with. And you're not really giving them any information about what you do, but hearing them talk about how much they love being there and the policies that they've changed and how it affected them for the better, like that makes me feel great, where I'm like, we're on the right track. Like we're really helping people, we're helping families, we're making a difference. Like there's an impact there. So that's the best. For me, that's the best thing.
And I love that because that's not us trying to
No.
get a good Google 5-star rating.
Yeah.
That's totally they're unknown that they're working for one of our members and are sharing this stuff
It's really cool.
proactively. Like it's just so exciting, isn't it?
Yeah. They're like, oh, they changed the parental leave policy and it's really helped like me and my husband out. Like, great.
Yeah.
Like, exactly what we wanted.
So cool. We're so lucky.
Yeah.
So looking ahead, this is a really exciting space we work in. But I want to know, what are your own, personal goals or aspirations on your journey as a gender equity advocate?
I always toss and turn about, what kind of the future looks like, and what I want to do and what will probably come about. I just want to keep doing things and keep pushing and keep impacting, until I'm just out of a job and out of a role, really. Whether that's, 10 years from now working in government, or just working more with organizations or universities or what have you. I think just making sure that I'm always an advocate and always pushing impact and pushing society forward. Like that's what I've always wanted, is to, leave this world better than when I found it, and I know that in my journey, I struggled a lot and I was around a lot of struggle, and I just don't want that for other people, like especially for our young people. I just want to make sure that I can cut the time in half for them, so I say like, I don't know what it really looks like for me later on, but I know that there are just common themes where I'm like, I will be making an impact and I will be pushing, just society forward.
I can't see you doing anything else, quite honestly. So
I don't want to do anything else.
yeah, that's good. I think you're right on track.
Yeah.
Social justice. That's your
always
thing, right?
I've
That's
always
your
been a
kind of
social
buzz.
justice warrior. Like always, like always comes from family.
So look, we talked about I guess the move from not really knowing what gender equity is to now companies are aware that it's critical and you don't have a choice. You need to engage with this topic, or quite frankly, you're going to miss out. And there's a real appetite for how to drive change. So looking into the future, what trends? How do you see what do you see like the next shift being in this space?
I see that. I always say, like, with equity, if you understand what equity is, then diversity and inclusion is the byproduct of that. So the future, what I see the trends happening is workplaces becoming almost, I don't want to really compare the two, but really almost becoming like how school is for kids, where I'm like, some kids will come to school to learn, others will come to school to get loved, right? So that's how I've always been, but I feel like organizations are going to start turning into that other support system for, people and families. And I was like, because that's how they will be able to grow. I see organizations becoming more people-focused, and once that happens, they'll get the outcomes that they want. But I see organizations really moving in that space where they'll become that other support system for people.
I love that. And I love the idea of that translating down at the school
Yeah.
level as well. And just going beyond like an education establishment to
Yeah.
more of that kind of wrap around like human
Yeah.
need, provider, enabler, support. Like,
Yeah. Well, it's always been like, leave your personal life and your family at the door and just be at work. And I think even senior leadership and even CEOs now, they're starting to understand. It's like, well, I'm more than just this, And once you start leading with that and being vocal about it and visible about it, other people in your organization start feeling that as well. So that's why I said what I said. I'm like, people are starting to understand like they're more than what they do, and making sure that they can bring their authentic self to work, where it's not I have to leave who I am at the door and just try to fit in with just being here. It's like, no, like you'll be who you are and bring that value to where you're at.
like imagine what we could unlock,
Yeah.
right? Like if every company, if every government department had that lens, like imagine what could be unlocked.
I wish more organizations had like that entrepreneurship kind of support where it's like if you want to be more and want to do more, like we give you the resources in order to do that. Like I wish they did more of that, tapped into more of that.
Speaking of which, you've got a couple of passion projects.
Yeah.
So why don't you tell our listeners all about those?
Okay. One of them is a youth entrepreneurship program for alternative schools. Really, those kids where they feel like this is their last shot, or I always say I'm like the kids that felt like they didn't fit in school and didn't have a voice, right? So I want to make sure that I can support them and create opportunities for them where they feel valued and supported to achieve what they always wanted to, like what they had in their head. And that's called HYPE, helping youths pursue entrepreneurship.
Cool.
And it's centered around all industries, but really like the creative arts as well. It's really a big focus on that. Another passion project of mine is an Indigenous university exchange program that I'm creating at the moment, where Indigenous students will go over to the U.S. and learn about from other institutions, especially universities, and share culture and learn about culture. And it's really about connecting the two regions and actually opening up a pipeline for conversation and cultural sharing. And then students from the U.S. will come over here and learn about, not Australia in a whole, but also the Indigenous culture, So I feel that that's one of my biggest passion projects, and learning about what it is to build within community, what it is to support community, and building for yourself, that entrepreneurship lens as well. So having your own and making sure that you're supporting the people around you and what that looks like and what that feels like, and seeing how others have done it and learning from what others have done, and then taking the good, but remembering what the difficulties and the issues were.
Awesome.
Yeah.
It's like two really, like as if you're not busy enough, like with trying to, change the world of gender equity, but I think those are two quite like complementary things in like empowering our the next generation, through HYPE and then that kind of like cross cultural experience with the exchange program. So really,
it's exciting. Like it's really, really cool. Like it's just making sure that the next generation has this kind of information. Really, my grandmother always taught me. She's like, if you know, then you teach. It's like there's no sense of you having the information and you just keeping it to yourself. It's like make sure that you're passing that on, because to be honest, I'm like that's how you live on. Like when you're no longer here, like how are you going to be remembered? Like what is your legacy going to be? So yeah, it's big for me. Like it's I love it.
Clearly. And we love that. You love it. We're reaping the benefits of that.
Yeah.
So thank you. I've got one last question for you. And that is, gender equity can be like a little bit overwhelming for some people. But what are some, just basic, like actionable steps that our listeners can take to support gender equity in their own lives and in their own communities?
I think the biggest thing is education. So learning more about what it is and where it comes from, how it started. I think doing kind of like the background about it. But then it's also the conversation. So making sure that you're having conversations and really starts with understanding. So making sure that you're listening more than you're talking. I think people listen to, make sure that they can get their word in or just waiting to speak. So I'm like, listen first, seek to understand and to be understood. I think that's one of the biggest things. But then it's also making sure that you are speaking up for those that might feel like they can't speak for themselves, making sure that you're showing them that there is support around them, even in places where they don't think that there is, So I'd say education and conversation and then support.
Love it.
Yeah.
Just so glad we've been able to just capture a little bit of Henry Cooper in today's episode and just share that.
It's
amazing.
very different being on the other side of this, I'll tell you that.
Good. And yeah, I just think there's lots, just, your approach and your mindset is just so awesome. And so if our listeners can just take away a couple of little nuggets from that, like it just might, change lives. And
it was something that's really, really cool is so people that we know, they look at our organization and they see who's in the positions that they're in. And they said, what's really, really cool is that they were like, Henry, you're really empathetic. You're really like understanding, and Ash is really like, she is those things, but she is really like, no, we're going to get this done. Like, we're going to achieve this. We're going to go here. And she goes, usually those roles are reversed with a lot of organizations. And she was like, what's really cool is that you're showing that it doesn't have to be that way. Yeah. And I'm like, very good observation. Like, that's really cool.
I love that.
I was like, that's powerful. And I was like, well, that's why we work so well.
Thank you to that anonymous person.
Yeah. We know this person very well too. So it was really, really cool.
Very cool.
To hear. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us
on
thank you
our
for this. Podcast.
Yeah, this is really, really cool. Thank you for this.
I've loved learning even a bbit more about you that I didn't know, and I'm sure our listeners will take some pearls of wisdom from that. Yeah. So thank you.
No, thank you. It was great.
That concludes another episode of Voices of Gender Equity, real and raw stories of impact. I hope this conversation has sparked a passion, revealed new insights, and inspired you to take action in the pursuit of gender equity. Remember, change begins with each one of us. So until next time, keep raising your voice, keep championing gender equity, and keep making a difference. This is Ashley McGrath signing off from Voices of Gender Equity, real and raw stories of impact.